Good evening, everyone. My name is Brock McMillan. I'm chair of the Central Region RAC, and I'm calling this meeting to order.
Perfect. So, Lake, will you go ahead and count us in?
Good evening, everybody. Well, we've got some technology issues here. Do we need to turn off their mic?
Salt Lake, we are getting feedback on our end.
The only mic I'm showing live was your mic. So now you've got my mic and your mic live. Are you still getting feedback?
Yes, we are. We're essentially getting a delay with the audio coming back into us on our end.
Of like
Yeah,
20 seconds.
That sounds like you've got a YouTube feed that's coming back in, and I don't know where that's coming from because the YouTube feeds I've got are muted.
Brock McMillan, I call this meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. This is the Central Regional Advisory Council meeting, and we'll start with introductions. So we'll start over here with Josh Gaze, and we'll come around the room.
Josh Kay, Central Region RAC, representing Sportsman.
Drew Eline, Forest Service.
Tyson Skeen, Public at Large.
Bryce Castaneda at large.
Braden Shepard, Agriculture.
Jared Peterson, my first meeting, so I'm on the Oak Ridge City Council.
Scott Jensen, Public at Large.
Eric Reed, BLM. Kellen Heyer, Agriculture.
Thank you. And we have two online, John Ziegler and Jim Schuler. If you want to, are you both on there?
Yeah, this is John Ziegler. I'm representing Wildlife Viewers.
And Jim Schuler, Animal Watcher.
And we have, it looks like two representatives from the division here. We have Rusty Robinson. His title is like big once in a lifetime coordinator. And we have Dustin Mitchell, who's the Southeast Regional Manager. And then we also have one board member, it looks like, two board members. We have Ken Johnson online, and we have Gary Nilsson present here in the meeting. Thank you guys for being here participating. At this time, I'll call for an approval of the agenda and past minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
And I'll second it.
So a motion by Kellen and second by Braden to approve the minutes and the agenda. I'm going to add the agenda in there too. All in favor? And I'm assuming Jim and John, you're good? Jim Schuler, John Ziegler.
There it is. I'm good. Absolutely.
Very good. And John? I'm going to say we outvoted him anyway. 10-0-1. One non-vote. Okay. At this time, we'll turn the time over to Danny Summers. That was a senior moment. I've known Danny for years. Holy smokes, for a regional update.
All right, thank you, Brock. Yeah, my name is Danny Summers. I'm the regional supervisor here in the Central Region. This is my first RAC meeting, and I'm new in the position, been here about 2 months. Just as introduction, I've worked for the division for over 20 years and done most of my career in the habitat section, habitat restoration, research, and that world. So excited to be here and to work in the Central Region and to be part of this. So for our update, the wildlife section, we've got the hunts that have opened, the archery hunt that's opened a couple weeks ago, and things are going well there. We've completed pronghorn and elk preseason classifications, where we've seen some effects of the drought on some of our recruitment of pronghorn, and the elk populations are looking good. Completed chukar population monitoring in the West Desert, and we've had lower chick production, but the adult population is looking good there. Our conservation biologist is working on with species status assessments for the wildlife action plan, and revamping our field guide. In the aquatic section, they're busy with fall stream monitoring this time of year, Diamond Fork, Nebo Creek, Battle Creek, Grove Creek, and other streams around the area. Also working with the Utah Lake Authority access plan and with fishing access there on Utah Lake, trying to help improve that situation. We've also met with the San Pete County and the Forest Service to improve a community fishery called Lake Hill, or Community Lake near Ephraim, and also working with on the Lower Diamond Fork restoration planning with the URMCC. We've had a couple of waters that have had emergency regulations, 9 Mile and Vernon reservoirs, with the drought conditions and loss of water there, and hopefully we'll have enough water to over summer some fish. And we're also working with, there's been some delays with funding, federal issues with some of our motorboat access projects that hopefully will come up next year. The habitat section, we recently did a tour with the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership National Board of Directors. They were in Wasatch County, and we took them to many different places there around the county and up at Strawberry Reservoir, and talked about wildlife management here in Utah, which was an interesting day. They've also been busy with guzzlers. They've built a couple new guzzlers on Dry Mountain with the Wild Sheep Foundation and the Dallas Safari Club. We're also working with the Forest Service to finalize the Manti LaSalle management plan, and also kind of wrapping up our noxious weed treatments on our wildlife management areas this time of year. Outreach has been really busy, and we have upcoming in 2 days from now, upland game hunting seminar with Jason Robinson, one of our wildlife biologists. He'll be here in this room. And we also are preparing for the state fair, or we'll be manning the fishing pond, and we do also need volunteers to help kids fish at that fishing pond at the state fair. So if you need dedicated hunter hours, sign up. Also, we will be doing underwater kokanee salmon live stream on YouTube in September, and a kokanee viewing event on September 20th at Strawberry Reservoir. And there's also a new mural at the visitor center for the kokanee salmon. With our Division of Law Enforcement, they've been busy. We've had several officers attend the North American Wildlife Enforcement Officers Association conference in Pennsylvania. It was a good opportunity. Had an interesting situation where Officer Anderson responded to a call about an individual that got bit by a coyote, and it turned out that some family members were driving towards Wendover and picked up the coyote and brought it home. They gave it a bath and tried to put a collar on it. Just a reminder to leave wildlife alone. Don't bring them home. It's been a really busy fire season, as we all know, and that's kept our law enforcement officers really busy, assisting on road closures, on the fires around the state, and they're working the hunting season, so it'll be the busy time of year for our law enforcement officers. I think that's pretty much our update. We've got a time lapse of one of our guzzler builds here for you to see. Grateful for the dedicated hunters and folks that help come do that. And I think that's all I've got.
Thank you, Danny. With the little fiasco at the beginning, I forgot to read our statement. I'm not going to read it. Just treat each other kindly, but I am going to say, if you want to make a comment in here, you need to fill out a card that's on the table outside the room and pass it up here. Otherwise, you'll not be allowed to make a comment. So if you have a comment to make on one of the agenda items, make sure you fill out a card. Oh, I'd also like to acknowledge that Chris Robinson from the Wildlife Board is online now attending the meeting. Thank you, Chris. Let me quickly give an update from the last board meeting, and then we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. So in the last Wildlife Board meeting, there was a motion. The first item was surrenders and variance rules, R657-42, R657-57. There was a motion to approve the recommended changes to the rules that was presented by the division. That motion passed unanimously. There was also, the next topic was sportsman draw and group applications, R657-41 and R657-62. There was a motion to approve the recommended changes as presented by the division. That passed unanimously. The next motion was dealing with tagging requirements, and there was a motion to approve the tagging requirement recommendations presented by the division with the addition of a fourth photo requirement for evidence of sex, and that motion passed unanimously. There was then a discussion of additional cow permits for CWMU, and there was a motion to approve the additional cow permits as presented by the division, and that motion passed with a vote of 4-2. There were 2 recusals. The next topic was additional bison permits due to the drought on the Henry Mountains, and there was a motion to approve 19 additional permits on the Henry Mountains, and that motion passed unanimously. And then the final action item was to have Gary Webb added to the CWMU Advisory Committee, and that motion to add him to the committee was passed unanimously. Any questions about the board meeting? Because we have Braden right here who attended. Okay.
Paul just jumped on as well.
Oh, awesome. We have another board meeting member that just jumped on. Paula Richmond's online as well. Welcome, Paula. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the statewide Angler Survey with Craig Walker. I don't know if he's online. I don't see him. And so I guess I'll bring it back to the public for any questions, or the RAC for any questions. I don't know who we're going to ask them to. It's not an action item. It was informational. Hopefully everybody had a chance to watch it. I don't know if we have other comments online or not. This is weird that nobody's here representing the division.
Yeah, there were no comments on this item online, on the first one.
So it was informational. We don't make an action, but if there were any comments I would like to send back to the Wildlife Board regarding this, it'd be a time to talk about it.
No, I think just a quick observation on these informational items. It's probably helpful just to have, if we're gonna have it on the agenda, to have the division folks here just in case there's more questions or exploring those items a bit more. So just, I'm not sure there, but just something to point out. We can work on that.
I agree, because I did have a couple questions about it. So
We expected them to be online. We're trying to track them down to have them join. I don't know if we want to skip to the other action items.
So, and that's fine with me. Let's do that because they're not here for any of the 3, Craig or Trina. I mean, of the 2. So let's jump to action item number 7. This would be Rusty Robinson, mountain goat and bighorn sheep, mid-plan reviews. Rusty, do you want to give any additional information in addition to what was on the presentations?
Yeah, maybe I'll just say that, the general consensus of the committee when we reconvened for this mid-plan review was that this was a very well thought out and well-written plan originally in 2018. And probably one of the biggest values of the Bighorn plan especially is that this really helped unite the division, the ag community, sportsmen. It was a really good thing to get that committee together and work through some issues, and some really strong partnerships and friendships came out of that. And this plan, it really illustrates the fact that we kind of support each other now. The things we accomplish in the Bighorn plan and in the Bighorn program are not in spite of the ag community, but because of the ag community, and vice versa. We support them as well. And we've kind of taken a little different attitude here in Utah that we're not gonna grow Bighorn at the expense of producers. And so just working through those issues in the original plan went a long way to push the Bighorn program forward and kind of unite those partnerships. And it's been great. So that was kind of the consensus of the committee, and that this was really a great plan, and just some minor edits and changes to kind of keep up with the times, both for the Bighorn and the Mountain Goat plans. But other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rusty. Questions from the RAC? Josh?
One question I had, so one of the updates was to reference the new waffle plan.
Mhm.
Is that just because that's a new plan, so you just want to reference a new one, or was there something particular in the plan that you're referencing?
No, there's nothing particular in it. And to be quite honest, I mean, we don't conform with every single guideline in that WAFO document as a state. Basically, we just wanted to, because there's a new plan and new guidelines, we wanted to put that in there, but we actually make a statement at the beginning that these are just guidelines. We're not held to any of these. And if our state politics and management plans are such where these guidelines don't make sense, we don't really have to follow them. But yeah, that was just an update, so we weren't having old information in there.
Thanks, Josh. Other questions? Any questions from the public? Turn the time over to Danny for a report on the online comments.
Yeah, we had two comments. We had one that strongly agreed and one that neither agreed or disagreed. And the comments, one was specifically not satisfied with the state of the Ogden goat herd, and then the other fully supported the proposal.
Thank you, Danny. Bring it back to the RAC. We used to go to public comments, but on my agenda, on my list here, it says we go to the RAC comments first. And so are there comments from the RAC?
Maybe Rusty, just address that comment about the Ogden unit.
I think we'd agree with that commenter. We're not satisfied with the state of that population either. We're trying to grow that herd again and get it going. And last December, we transplanted some goats from the Beaver to Willard Peak to try to give them a little shot in the arm. And that's our goal, is to get back to where we were, and we can actually manage to that objective someday.
Thank you, Rusty. Any other comments? Go ahead, Josh.
So a quick question maybe for you, or a comment on the Fremont Island thing, if that was going to be like a potential huntable population, or if that's just a nursery group. And then as far as one more thing on the boulder, a lot of times with wildlife, you're trying to produce connectivity, but with sheep, a lot of times it's trying to not have that connectivity.
Yeah.
Is that a worry on that unit, given the other surrounding units?
Yeah, it is. And that's kind of where we've been with Bighorn management, the last decade, is let's hold them real tight and keep them, keep them healthy and all that kind of stuff. And we still feel that way, but the easy places are all taken. And so now we're to a point where, okay, where can we adopt a little bit of risk? Where can we help expand a population, fill in some gaps? And maybe they get sick someday, but we can have a huntable population there. And these disease events they cycle through and, and they rebound. And so we're kind of to the point we'd rather have some sheep than zero sheep. And that's a good place. There's great habitat there. And we hope they stay healthy. Maybe they get mingled in with the Escalante and stuff. But yeah, it's just a plan that there's no immediate plans for either one of those there or Fremont Island. And the initial thoughts and conversations with Fremont is that would be another nursery population. It wouldn't be a hunted population. But again, there's no immediate plans. We just thought, where's a place where, in this life of this plan, before we write a new one, would we maybe have the possibility of putting sheep there. And so those two areas popped up. But yeah, we'll work through those issues but yeah, nothing in the immediate future for either one of those.
Thank you. Other questions from the RAC? We have one question from the public, Wade Garrett. To remind everybody, you have up to 3 minutes to comment. Go ahead, Wade. Introduce yourself and who you represent, please.
Oh, I thought I pushed it. Sorry. Wade Garrett, Utah Farm Bureau. Appreciate working with Division on this plan. As I talk to my counterparts on neighboring states, they don't have the same thing that ag does here, that you work closely with ag and not build these herds on the back of that. Hopefully you found good partners in us as well, and we're grateful for that and just support the plan. And thanks for all the division does. And I'll put in a pitch for the fishing, like get up there to the state fair, help those kids. I'm on the state fair board, and we can bring ag and wildlife both to our city friends, which helps all of us. So if you have a few minutes of your time, the division does a superb job up there. And so, that's not part of this item, but it's a great opportunity to get up there and help those city youth.
Thank you, Wade. Bring us back to that was the only comment we had from the public. Bring it back to the board for discussion. To the RAC for the discussion, not the board. We're not even close to that. We are the poor peasants. So bring it back to the RAC for the discussion. Seeing none, I'd recognize a motion.
I'll move to accept as presented.
I'll second.
So a motion from Scott and seconded by Bryce to accept as presented. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
John? Maybe John dropped off. Okay, passes unanimously. The next agenda item is the Southeast Region Big Game Management Plans. Dustin Mitchell, come up to the mic, and do you have something to add to your presentations or to summarize that you'd like to share with us?
Grateful to have the rain finally. No, everything's good that way.
Okay, questions for Dustin from the RAC? I have a couple, Dustin. So why, if we know that disease transmits quicker in a higher density population, why would we want to increase the population on the soil where we have the highest prevalence of chronic wasting disease?
It's a very good question. And we're looking at it, population wise. We're doing some hunts this year, just specifically for CWD to try to reduce the transmission between bucks, which are going to be moving the most. We have been higher in the past. I don't know if you remember from the presentation, we was up to 13,000 on our objective 2 plans ago. We dropped it down to 8,000, and then we're looking to bump it up. So it's not as high as it has been. Looking at all of our habitat conditions and body conditions from deer, it looks like we haven't hit carrying capacity. So we are comfortable with bumping it up there so we don't have to dip into the doe population or have any management actions that way.
Other questions for Dustin?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the historic population trends on that same unit on the LaSalle. It seems like that unit historically has really struggled to even meet objectives, and the objective was way low. I hadn't been tracking that, but I was really surprised to see that the numbers were as high as they were right now. Do you have a historic trend data you could share with us at all on that unit?
Let's see. So I don't know how I can show that on. Do you have the presentation? No? So from here, I've got from 2020 is what I've got our population estimates from. It was 6,500 then, 5,900 the next year, 5,500, 5,500, and now 88 with this new model that we're using. So it's been high. It's kind of sunk down lower over the last 5 years, and then it looks like we had a little bit of an increase this year again. But we are finding some things with these neonate studies that we're doing. We're finding that there's a lot more stillborns than we ever knew about, and so that's probably one of the things that's contributed to that low population there in the past.
So that's a pretty substantial jump in modeled numbers. What are the factors that are most contributing to that?
So the biggest jump would be from last year, right? When we switched our models and we're using now a time-specific variable instead of constant. So like in 2018, we lost almost all of our colored fawns, especially on the San Juan near that unit. The way that the model accounted for it was just taking an average instead of actually using those values. So now we're using those real time values for those years, and that's what's made the influx.
So with deer, we're not doing like helicopter flight counts. It's all model numbers then.
Yep.
They do use fawn to doe and buck to doe ratios and harvest records, so it's a pretty good mathematical model, but yeah. My other question, what difference does the objective make if we're never going to harvest a female?
We have managed to a number.
I'm just curious on that one. I don't see us in the foreseeable future going back to harvesting females like we did in the 80s when we were harvesting, I don't know, 30,000 a year.
I guess I would just say to that, if we did see range conditions that got really poor, or we started to lose a lot of fawns showing that that would hit carrying capacity, then we'd probably have to look at it.
Thank you.
So I do have one other question then. I'm curious, is this the first region that's using the new model, and are we going to see a similar bump across the remainder of the state?
You're going to see probably some more. So every 5 years we do these, and so our region is the first one to do it. The southern region had some also, but theirs didn't affect it so much. But probably next year you'll see some others come through like this.
So we're magically going to hit this 400,000 deer number regardless, huh? This you, Brock, with your, this
has nothing to do with me.
This sounds like the new math, right? You had the old guard back there who learned math the way I did. Now we've got the new math coming in, and all of a sudden we're growing deer like crazy.
Just because you can't understand the new math, that doesn't mean that it's not real. Go ahead, Tyson.
Can you explain the new modeling to me like I'm a 5-year-old so that I can understand what that means? Because I know that's going to be quite controversial, particularly in your region. There's a lot of people that don't believe the old numbers. So how does that modeling actually work? Like, I'm not saying your numbers are wrong. I just want to understand the process.
Yes. So we've been collaring all these deer for years now, right? So we've got this huge data set now where we've got survival, we've got adult doe survival, we've got fawn survival, we've got our harvest information, we've got buck to doe ratios, all of this information that we're collecting now. In the past, the models that we used, they competed and you would get penalized for the way that they the way that they use those data. And so it would spit out whatever fit the best. And hopefully it was with the least parameters that we used, the least variables used in that model. But like I said, we were taking an average, and that was usually the model that would be picked out of I think there was 7 different models to choose from. And so now with taking the time specific and looking at it, it's more surgical, looking at that unit as a whole with those data that fit that unit. Then it can pick, it's just one model now, and it'll show what that population's doing that way. It's like a bank account pretty much, you know, you're looking at what's going in, what's coming out each year, and then where you sit at the end of that year. Does that help at all?
Well, just a request. I think all of us would really love to see that model in application. So I don't know the best way to do that. If you put out a YouTube video that gives some demonstrations of how that works that the public can see and we can see, or a work day or what, but all of us kind of I scratch my head so much, there's not much left up there anymore when I start listening about models anymore.
And maybe Rusty knows, did we have that on a board meeting once for the work plan?
It's good, we have like a action, what's it called, board? Actual-
Yeah.
The informational board meeting we have every year. What's it called?
Exactly.
Work session.
Work session, yes.
I don't know what you have.
Maybe that's an idea we could do for one of those too, and people could watch that. Yeah, it's a good suggestion.
It's really not super complicated if you have good data to put into it, but because you know how many animals you're removing, you know what the survival is, you know the buck harvest. So when they go in and do their buck to doe counts and they know how many they took out of the population and how much that shifted the buck to doe ratio, they know they have an estimate. They can get a pretty good population estimate. But yeah. You don't like it, huh?
I can see Scott thinking, and I was like, I'll
Well,
wait.
I mean, I think this is good. I thought they presented it to the wildlife board last year or the year before, but I think it's a great idea to present to the model so everybody can see where the math comes from, because there is a lot of skeptical individuals out there. I mean, you saw that on the one comment about the manti is they don't believe the numbers, and I know the division, and you guys would welcome anybody to come out and do classification with them so they can at least believe the classification numbers. And go ahead, Josh.
Josh, go ahead.
So this is maybe more of a comment, but a question as well. Unless I misunderstood it, this is just adjusting where you think the population is, but it will have absolutely no impact on management. So it's not going to change hunting tag numbers. It's not going to change unless the range data shifts or unless you get up to the new level and we feel like we have to start reducing. As far as a sportsman goes in Utah, this is no change.
Correct.
Well, but the difference is the population, the counted population numbers have jumped by almost 3,000 animals. Didn't they go from 5,300 to
We didn't actually grow that
8,800?
many. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
Right, but if that number shifts up, the number of permits go up as well.
Not necessarily. We manage population and buck harvest differently. That's usually through our buck to doe ratios that we get for
Correct.
for permit.
And down there, it's like $30 per 100 does
It was
post
19.
season. Oh, it was 19 now?
What, on the manti?
No,
Sorry.
LaSalle.
What's that? And that's why we're doing, one of the reasons why we're having those late season hunts too, is try to reduce that.
Yeah, I really struggle with that number.
And
With the buck to doe ratio number or what number?
Yeah, let's not get into that one though.
Go ahead, Braden.
I will comment that the manti is terrible. There's no deer on the manti, so don't hunt it. No, just kidding. With that said, a couple questions actually on I noticed that on the manti, the body fat composition for the southeast or southwest, I think it was, and the north was like a couple inches different, or millimeters. Was it millimeters?
Millimeters.
Does that really make, like, it was like, I think you only had one sample size for the southwest. So I didn't know if that really was a good representative sample. I think you had the north end pretty well for years sampled, but there's only one, I think 1 year that had southwest manti sampled. It was like 7 point something millimeters. I'm just curious on that, if that makes, if there's a range.
So one of the problems though, Braden, is that a lot of the deer that we do over in Gordon Creek come from the South Manti. So they live on the South Manti. They cross Fairview Canyon, they go over the mountain and they come down into Gordon Creek. And so it's hard to separate the north and south by our winter fat numbers, but But a couple millimeters is a big difference. But the other thing I will comment as he's pulling data up is from the northern part of the state, you need a lot more fat to get through the winter, and the southern deer don't carry any fat. And so you would expect from northern Manti to southern Manti, what is that, 60, 70 miles? That you would expect a shift in fat just based on latitude.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. And I see what you're saying. We had that 7.3 in December of 2020.
Yeah.
Southwest Manti, and that's the only entry that we have from Southwest Manti. Most of that, it's either, it all came from the Southeast after that.
Yeah, and now you say we were picking them up, that makes sense, that they can be, in Gordon Creek. The other question I had is on e-tagging. Are you guys going to use any of that kind of e-tagging harvest data into these plans in the future as you kind of get better, site-specific harvest data where deer and elk, I guess deer in this case, are killed? Or is that
We
just
probably will. I think it's kind of
too early?
side of it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
I think Scott's got to me a little. I just want to clarify. So when you're setting the tag numbers for Mel harvest, I've always seen that reported in approved buck to doe ratios, right? For whatever strategy per unit. Would that continue to be used to set tag allocations for the next, let's say 5 years or whatever? Or is that not? Is that only a piece of it and it could increase tag numbers with this change of population estimate?
No, this wouldn't affect our tag proposals ever.
Is that true?
Well,
It goes into the model.
It's going to go up with your population, I guess. So it's the proportion would be kind of grow with it, but we're not going to use this increased objective as part of our plan to increase tags for bucks.
How are the buck doe ratios? How is that data collected?
So in the fall during the rut, we go out and
So that's a visual sign. So even if it's a hypothetical deer, it would have to be one that was seen with antlers.
So I could see the concern here that the tags might increase, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that happened and then the buck to doe ratios decline, they would drop that back immediately to get that back into objective. Come to my office. Any other questions from the RAC? John, come on in. Questions from the public? After questions from the public. Questions from the public? Okay, turn the time over to Danny for summarization of the online comments.
Okay, we had 2 online comments. One was neutral towards the proposal and the other disagreed. And specifically one didn't agree with the estimate on the Manti unit of the deer population. And the other spoke about disagreeing with just generally tag allocations on struggling deer units.
Thank you. I'll bring it back. We do have no public comments. We have no public comments on this agenda item. So I'll bring it back to the RAC for discussion. Tyson.
I think it's awesome if we're having more deer, right? I don't know a single person in my life that I associate with that doesn't want to see more mule deer, right? We argue about elk and all this other stuff, but I don't know anybody that says, no, let's really reduce the number of our mule deer in this state. So if we're increasing objectives, I think that's a good thing and could be positive. But I've heard about these models and I know that we have to use modeling, right? Like I understand that we're not gonna go out and count each individual mule deer on the landscape. It's not realistic. But I too would like to learn more about it. I'm not questioning it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just want to be more educated. And I think the public could stand to be more educated because especially in your region, right? Like, you know this, you know how much pushback you guys get down there on the deer numbers and everything. And maybe you will never convince some people, obviously, but the more information, the better in my mind. I always want as much information as I can possibly get.
So I think it's a great, this is great. And I think in these meetings where we don't have a lot of agenda items to discuss, we should be inviting the wildlife chief or at least the central region manager to come and present the model and discuss it so that everybody's more informed on how these numbers come. I think that's a reasonable thing to ask. Or maybe the board could have that in their work session so that everybody could just get on and watch it. I mean, we have that mule deer work session every single year. This could be a topic in that work session. Everybody could go watch.
And then that way it's easily accessible to go back, right? People want to go back, it's there, it's recorded, it's documented.
Great. Discussion on the current agenda item, the Southeast region mule deer plans.
Decided to see an extra 3,000 deer already.
Maybe not this year, buddy. This is a pretty tough year.
I've already been down and counted them. We just knocked one out.
Any other discussion? Well, I'd entertain a motion. Go ahead, Tyson.
I would make a motion to accept as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion from Tyson, a second from Bryce to accept the division's recommendations as presented. All those in favor? Jim?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Do we have anybody on from the state?
We have
Trina, excellent.
It's Trina.
Trina, oh.
Thanks for joining.
Trina,
Yeah.
thank you. Let's go to agenda item number 6, the Blue Ribbon Economic Survey results. And Trina, is there anything that you want to add to your presentation?
I guess I would just reiterate that fishing is hugely important to the state of Utah, the economy, to people's livelihoods. And I think that our results really drove that home, really showed that.
Trina, I had a question. So you said the average fisherman goes fishing 14 times, is that right?
Yes, that was the median number. The average was 20, but that was a little bit on the skewed side. There are certain individuals that really enjoy fishing and go a lot. So they took the median and they used the median, and that was 14.
Okay, the median. And every trip is 187 or whatever dollars. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that was the average. Of course, that's including non-blue ribbon and blue ribbon, and a substantial increase from the previous study.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC for Trina?
We're glad you're here. And just, I guess, another question about that dollar spent. So that $187 average. Now, I forget, did you guys do a multiplier on that to show how that then, yeah, that multiplier, how did you guys come up with that multiplier to say this is what it really meant to the community? Because it seemed kind of high to me, but I'm not an economic expert. I'm a lawyer, so I have no idea.
Well, and I'm not an economic expert either. I do apologize, but it's probably actually something where I should have Dr. Kim explain it in maybe as briefly as he can in an email and then send it to your RAC members, simply because I think I'm going to butcher it, if that makes any sense, right? I'm going to describe it very vaguely and generally. I'm not an expert in that. So I think it'd be better if you want the specifics, I can either send you the report and you could read through that. They do go through quite a bit of that. Or I could ask a specific question to Dr. Kim and send you his response, whatever you prefer.
I think the report would be great. I'd like to know how it came up with 18,000 jobs and stuff too.
Yeah.
That's good information.
Yeah, they used I think it's the implant model, and he describes a lot of that, and that's, to be honest, it's just kind of over my head.
Scott, do you have any questions about that model, Scott?
So a mathematical model, huh? It's been a hot topic for us.
I was just gonna say, Randy, it's easy math if you just look at it.
I'm sure it's super simple.
Point taken.
In both of these, presentations we had on the surveys just kind of showed that fishing is important still. How do you guys use these surveys to guide decision making moving forward? It wasn't like we learned a lot of new information. We just learned that, hey, this makes a lot of money for the state.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to understand angler motivations. And interestingly, there's quite a few similarities between the two studies, right? So anglers are trying to find solitude. They're trying to get away from crowds and get away from, the hustle and bustle. They are trying to find different types of opportunities that are very specific. And they're looking for diverse opportunities in terms of fish species. So I think between those sorts of angler motivations, I think that we just need to ensure that we're providing those opportunities adequately based on what our anglers are seeking, right? And every time we do the statewide angler survey, the regulation survey every other year, when we go through the regulation process, we are finding out more information. We're making sure that we're asking them the questions like, what fish do you prefer to fish for, that sort of thing. So we know what percentage of our anglers on a statewide basis prefer to fish for kokanee. We know how many of the percentage that like to fish for smallmouth bass. And so you can kind of look statewide at, are we providing similar numbers and within a fair distance, less than 100 miles, to these people that prefer fishing for these types of fisheries? It is difficult to provide locations with solitude, ensuring that people can get away from it all every time they go out. But there are definitely places where people can get away from it. And we don't necessarily want to send everyone to a little water body, in the remote Uintas per se, but we can send them to the Uintas. We can remind them that is there and really kind of spark that interest and see if we can maybe get more anglers going to some of these more remote locations, not sending them anywhere specific, just reminding them that these opportunities are out there. If your fishing was really crowded at Echo, then maybe go up the road, an hour, hike in a couple of miles, that sort of thing. So I think it's a combination of outreaching and what are the messages that we should be sending to people, and then also making sure that we're providing all of the different opportunities, making sure that it's kind of in line with the percentages that we see from our angler surveys.
And I have a question. From the presentations, it seemed to me like fisheries management is like a social studies class more than a biology class. So what's the role of biology in this management process?
So it is very social, right? We are trying to provide opportunities commensurate with what people want to see on the ground. But the reality is you may want largemouth bass in the high Uintas, but the biology is not going to allow that, right? That's not the kind of habitat that they're going to thrive in. You may want trout in a community pond on the Wasatch Front, but that's only going to be sustainable for part of the year. So the role of biology is to take the social aspect and what people are asking for and kind of checking that with biology, saying, yes, that's possible. No, that's not really possible. Kind of just setting those sideboards and setting realistic expectations for what people can expect to see out there. The other aspect is, when we have a species assemblage set at a water body, that's great. People may want to see us stocking largemouth bass, but we don't need to do that, right? The biology doesn't require that. They start reproducing on their own and sustaining themselves on their own. If we just were to introduce more, it would just be competition, right? So the actual management of the species, like, do we stock them? How much harvest do we allow? That's the sort of thing where, after we hear from people and we know what they want, we try to provide that. And then we need to go in and make sure we know what's going on the ground so we can understand stocking rates, harvest need, that sort of thing. So it's definitely, there's a combination there for sure.
Thank you. Brent is actually representing both the agenda items. So if anybody has any questions, I think
Yeah, Craig,
we should ask her. Thank you. So we don't do public comments on this, or do we? Are there any public questions? And I don't have any comment cards for these agenda items. Okay. Go ahead, Bryce.
Trina, I just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work everybody's putting in over there. I appreciate it. My kids love to fish, and I know a lot of people in my life and friends and family really, really appreciate having so many wonderful options that are provided. So thank you for all your hard work.
Of course. Glad you're out there enjoying it.
Good comment. Go ahead, Tyson.
And I was just going to say as well, as somebody, I really appreciated this presentation on the financial impacts of this, a multi-billion-dollar impact on our state's economy, which is huge. I won't get into all the details, but what brought me into wanting to be involved in policy in this state 16 years ago was fishing, and some of the issues that we've seen over the years in Utah with that. And back then, it wasn't as easy to articulate how big of a how financially positive this was for our state. So I love seeing this. My skin did, my spidey senses went up a little bit when I was watching this, and I kept hearing about how are we going to make sure that people can be isolated and not have all the crowding. And then I started thinking about limited entry fishing units and other things like that. And that will make my head explode. I'm just going to say that right now. We're not doing that.
We haven't talked about that. It's more about like directing people to specific areas.
Yeah, you don't even have to do that though. Like let them find it on their own, right? with that. But Utah has some of, and you know, I've fished all over, and there are awesome opportunities everywhere. But the diversity that we have in fishing ability in Utah is incredible, and I think we've done a really good job with that. And so, as somebody who loves to fish, well done, and I look forward to taking advantage of that more in the future.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Any other comments? If you're going to make a comment, Ken, you have to fill out a card. I think I have to have a card, so just fill it out really quick. Oh, I got it right here. It's coming up. So I have it right here in front of me. Ken Strong, you have 3 minutes. Tell me what your name and who you represent.
Ken Strong, and I represent Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife. And I just want to say some of the stuff that Tarina has said, such as people wanting largemouth bass and the UNAs and different things. It's happening too much in the state of Utah, where people are backyard biologists have decided what fish need to be in which water. And that's why Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife has offered a $5,000 reward upon anyone caught and prosecuted for doing that. They've worked really hard in making things happen. You know, I can't imagine how much it's cost at Strawberry, because one walleye was pulled out of that lake. And the question still is, was it really in there or not? But that's one thing we have to watch.
Thank you, Ken. Public comments.
There was one.
Oh, we have a public comment. I'll turn the time over to Danny to summarize.
Yeah, on the first item, there was no public comment. On the second one, there was just one. They were neutral, but they just didn't want to pay more to go fishing.
Thank you. So I'll bring it back to the RAC. If there's any other discussion on these 2 agenda items, kind of treating them together because they're informational. Okay, thank you, Trina.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
I believe that brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there any other business does somebody want to make a motion about having that model presented, or do we want to there's 3 board members here. They've heard the discussion and trust them to do something about it.
I'll make a motion, but I don't know what that motion needs to be. Scott, help me out here.
Well, I think in principle, we'd just like to understand or have a demonstration how that model works. If somebody could walk us through maybe a unit or a unit in each region, maybe that would be the best way to pick a unit in each region, and a presentation that came to our RAC and it was done here on the Wasatch, and something, another one on each region. I don't care how it really lays out, but that would make it personable to each region if it happened that way. That might do it well, but in some fashion to demonstrate how that mule deer model works.
So maybe the motion would be to ask the board for a action item to have details of the model presented in such a way that the RACs have access to that.
So moved. But I think we need to make that clear. So, because that was part of our training I watched, is making sure we have clear motions that the division can actually take. So I would make a motion. We don't direct the division doing anything, right? We just request the board does things.
We would request that the board make an action log item.
I would make a motion that we request the wildlife board to make an action log item for the division to come and present the mule deer model, not just the findings of the mule deer modeling, but educating RAC members on how the mule deer modeling works, letting us look at that system and providing that information to the public.
Go ahead, Jared.
Well, this is my first meeting, but I mean, the data that's collected on the old modeling or whatever, can that be translated into this new model? So maybe like past years, you can say, you know, maybe that number would have been this under the new model. I think that's kind of what I'm getting. I mean, we got a huge jump in numbers, but if that data is common, it seems to me that you could work that and say, look, the old numbers probably would have been this under the new model. I don't know if you can put that.
So we have a motion. We can come back to that. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, now we can discuss
Bryce,
the motion.
You were 3 for 3 almost, Bryce. Sorry, I broke that.
Yeah. So now we can discuss the motion. Go ahead, Josh. And I don't want to shut you out. I think that's great, Jared. That they do have data. It's a ton of work for the biologists. So I think we need to be careful what we ask each of the biologists to do. But I think, go ahead, Josh.
So discussing the motion, like I've had the opportunity to look at some of those models, right? And kind of work through them, and I gained somewhat of an appreciation for the robustness of it. But the fundamental problem that I see with the sportsman groups and the public is that even when you then understand the model and you can appreciate how robust the model is, you can always attack the data that goes into it. You can always, like, what I saw happen was, I don't agree with this, so it was presented, and then we actually ran some calculations, right? And it was amazing. But then it was like, well, these buck-tail ratios are these certain, you know, these like, so I do think it's helpful to show and to make that available to the public, that if you want to get educated on how that's happening, that there's some sort of tool to do it. But it would have to be, in my opinion, some kind of real analysis done where you can look at the data that goes into it. Because if not, I mean, we're still going to have people that are skeptical, but you got to kind of see that to see where they're coming up with those numbers, I think. And so I think that could be included to some degree, that like some hypothetical or some real, you know, calculation was done.
So I think that's a great comment. Josh said the model's only going to be as good as the data you put into it. So, because this happens all the time as you come and you learn the model and you say, well, I don't believe those data. And so again, every biologist in every region would welcome people to come along and help classify to see where those numbers come from. And so they are more, at least have a little more buy-in that the numbers are real. They're not just made up. Go ahead, Tyson.
And I couldn't agree with Josh more on that. I don't think that this is an effort to try and convince everybody. You're never going to convince everybody, no matter what. And it's not even to convince me. Like, I'm not even questioning the division's numbers by saying that. I just simply want to understand better how this works.
Go ahead, Bryce.
Along the lines of discussing the motion, I think I think it would be very beneficial for, not only us, but for the public as well, sportsmen, whomever it might be that's questioning, to see exactly how we get from point A to point B, meaning here's the data that we have, here's the model, and we're plugging these numbers in, and which allows us to then arrive to these tag numbers. And I think that's what we're talking about, right? But I obviously believe that people will see and understand, and it will make sense. And then there's others that simply won't, or that they will deny, because it's the same thing. We're talking about those that have made this their life's passion and their life's work to understand what's happening to these animals. And then there's those that go out and hunt one canyon that they've hunted their entire life and not see 2 bucks. And they're very upset by that. And I feel like this will hopefully, if we do this and if we do it right, will allow a greater vision, I would say.
I think this is a great recommendation. Go ahead, Drew.
I agree. I think it'd be great for everyone to look at, but I will caution that we don't ask every biologist for every region each to do a very specific unit, just because that's a lot of work for every biologist. If they said it's a 5-year rotation, I think we should allow them to present it in who's ready with that data, with that model, and then hopefully maybe in future years we see that on different units. But I would urge we don't restrict it to everyone needs to present each region.
And I don't think our motion's done that. We're just asking them to do something that we can all understand. So it could be a board work session for an hour at a board work session. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Did you vote, Jared? Okay. Jim?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. I have no other agenda items. Anything else? Okay, thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.